Hello, everybody. Hallo zusammen, and welcome to this German GCSE and iGCSE video tutorial. So in this specific tutorial, we are looking at how to approach the role play, which is, of course, a really important part of the German GCSE or iGCSE speaking tests, and something that the vast majority of students will do as part of their speaking exam. So I'm going to take you through what this consists of, how to go about the role play, how to prepare for it, to make sure you can boost those grades as much as possible. Okay, so firstly, just to introduce myself quickly, I'm Dananjay Talwar, and I studied French and Italian for my MA at the University of Cambridge. I graduated some time ago now, back in 2015. And yeah, I've been an educator and mostly a tutor since that time. I'm really passionate about languages and language learning. I've learned more than 20 of them to different levels, and that includes at least 9 to fluency, of which one is German, of course. I did study German for GCSE and myself in a one-year crash course, and then practiced it considerably with friends. So I likewise, along with learning languages, I love to motivate my students to learn languages and give them the tools to enable them to do so efficiently, but while also having a huge amount of fun. And so far, I've done this with over 500 different students whom I've helped to achieve or even exceed their target grade for language GCSEs or iGCSEs as a full-time tutor. So I've taught 8 languages so far to GCSE or iGCSE level, several of those at higher levels as well. And it's been a very rewarding experience, of course. Okay, so these are the German GCSE and iGCSE exam boards. So it is important and definitely useful to be familiar with what exam board you are studying as early as you can, ideally, because there are some differences, as we'll see as well later on in this video, in the format between different exam boards. So try to be aware of what exam board you're studying. You should certainly be able to ask your school teachers from year 10 onwards. They should definitely be able to inform you which exam board you're taking, and try and tailor your preparation. Try and use materials for that exam board wherever possible, so that your preparation is as relevant for you and for what you will come across in your final exams as it can be. Another small difference is that these GCSE exam boards, the 4 GCSE exam boards mentioned, they all have a difference between foundation tier and higher tier. So foundation tier only goes up to a certain grade. Higher tier, you can go all the way up to a grade 9. So make sure you're aware of which of those you're doing if you're studying a GCSE exam board. That distinction does not exist for the iGCSE exam boards. And the good news is that all of these exam boards that are in bold here, those are the ones that do have a role play as part of the German GCSE or iGCSE speaking test, which means if you're studying any of these exam boards, essentially all of them except for Pearson Edexcel iGCSE, then keep on watching because this should be very relevant and useful for you. So what actually is the role play? I'm going to give you a few examples in a second, but the role play is the first part, usually, of the speaking exam. That actually has changed a little bit. For some exam boards, AQA or Pearson Edexcel GCSE, I believe it's not necessarily going to be the very first thing that you do anymore. But typically, the role play used to be the first part of inevitably the first part of the German GCSE or iGCSE speaking exam, and it still largely is. Although AQA and Pearson Edexcel GCSE, it's worth mentioning, have also changed the format and syllabus of their language GCSE papers from 2026 onwards. And do check out the other videos I've made on those changes, if it's relevant for you. So the role play was traditionally designed to somewhat ease students into the speaking test. It was typically the first part of the speaking exam. And so it was supposed to be somewhat easier, somewhat simpler compared to, say, the topic-based conversations or the parts that could come later. That does not mean that you do not have to prepare for the role play. You should still prepare. You should still revise for it. And there is still definitely relevant exam technique because exam technique as with most of these language GCSE and iGCSE papers, can make a real difference here as well. So don't overlook the role play and don't dismiss it as being too easy at all. But it has been designed to ease students in somewhat. And so you don't need to show off your language as much in the role play as you do in other parts of the speaking exam. The role play comes down to largely keeping things simple and making sure your German is accurate as well while conveying the required information. Okay, so the role play is always in an imaginary situation. Of course, it's supposed to recreate potential real life scenarios where you might be in a German speaking environment. So the role will always be set in a German speaking environment. Now, as a student, you would always play the part of yourself. That does not change. The examiner, on the other hand, could play a wide variety of different roles, and that will vary from role play to role play. So make sure the first thing you do when you're given your candidate card for the role play is to read through all of the instructions and the information contained there very carefully. Some exam boards, say Cambridge iGCSE, for example, give very little information on the candidate card for the role play. Others, say AQA, give considerably more information that allows you to prepare during your preparation time, which is about 10 to 15 minutes before the actual speaking test starts. Regardless, make sure that you do read through all of the information on the role play and make a mental note of the role that the examiner plays, because that could vary considerably. It could be a friend, a waiter or waitress, a teacher. Those are just some examples. There could be many others too. The exact scenario that you're in for the role play can also vary a lot. For example, you could be at a job interview that came up in a 2022 role play for Pearson EdXL, or speaking to a German friend, as was the case in a specimen role play for AQA. That last one, speaking to a friend from Germany, Austria, or another German-speaking country, is a very, very common scenario that comes up. And if you do practice using past papers, as you ideally should, you are very likely to come across that one time and time again. But many different scenarios are possible. And of course, it's really important to make a mental note of what the scenario is, where exactly you're supposed to be in this fictitious situation and who you're talking to. Okay, the role play usually consists of 5 prompts that the student must answer. There can be a bit of variation in this from exam board to exam board, so make sure that the information you have is as accurate as possible for your exam board. These can include an unpredictable question. So that means a question that the student is asked by the examiner, which they cannot necessarily prepare for because they don't know exactly what that question is going to be. Something that's unpredictable or not scripted or written on the role play card for the candidate. And a question that the student must ask the examiner as well. So as a student, be aware that in the role play, you may also be required to ask the examiner a question, and it should be written on the role play card where you have to do that too. There can be differences from exam board to exam board in terms of these elements, so make sure to use the most accurate material as possible for you when preparing. The examiner is usually the one that starts and ends the role play. I believe that's the case for almost every single exam board. CCEA, I believe, which is specific to Northern Ireland in any case, is a rare exception where sometimes the student may have to initiate the role play, but otherwise, for the vast majority of instances and exam boards, it's the examiner who will kick off the role play, usually by announcing the scenario, reading out the situation in German, as we'll see, and then, asking the student the first question. The student examiner, then they take it in turns to speak. So during the actual role play, they would alternate, just like a real life conversation. That's what it's supposed to be like. And it would normally be the examiner that ends the role play the vast majority of the time as well. So as a student, you usually will not have to worry about kicking off or ending the role play. Okay, here are some top tips for how to handle or how to approach the role play. Make full use of your preparation time. So as a student, you would get 10 to 15 minutes. That depends on your exam board, exactly how long that time period is. But you get some 10 to 15 minutes before your speaking test even officially starts to prepare. So you'd be sitting alone with an invigilator whose only role really is to make sure that you don't cheat, and potentially other students who are preparing as well. And during those 10 to 15 minutes, you're not allowed to look up any words or use the internet or anything like that. But you will have all of your candidate cards for all of the sections, all of the relevant sections of the speaking test. So you'll have your role play candidate card and potentially your candidate cards for the photo card, reading aloud task, and topic based, or not the topic based conversations actually, but potentially the photo card and reading aloud task as well. And you'll be given 10 to 15 minutes to prepare all of those. So make sure that you take full advantage of that and use that to the maximum benefit. Try and mentally plan out exactly what you're going to say for each part of the role play and exactly when you're going to say it. And again, this depends on the exam board, but you can often make notes during that preparation time. So if you can, then I highly recommend doing so. If you can make notes, you're allowed to take them in with you to the actual speaking exam. Try to stay calm. The role play usually comes right towards the start of your speaking exam. So it can be more nerve-wracking for students. The speaking exam in general tends to be the one exam that flusters students the most, often because of that feeling of being on the spot. And also, it's usually the first exam or the first GCSE paper, in fact, that many students will do. So try and stay calm, try and take a few deep breaths. Remember that you don't really have to show off in the role play at all. So that should also help to stay calm. The role play is just about keeping it simple and accurate. You do not have to show off your language. This is not the part of the speaking exam where you need to bring in complex grammatical structures. You can do that elsewhere, and do check out my other videos on the other parts of the speaking exam too. But you do not need to do that even to get towards the top marks at all in the role play. Make sure to answer every single prompt or bullet point. Again, this varies from exam board to exam board. Some exam boards will give the students minimal information about what the questions will be in the role play on their candidate card. So there won't be much information given on the candidate card at all, as is the case currently now for Cambridge iGCSE, for example. Other exam boards like AQA will give students a lot more information about every single prompt or bullet point, every single thing that they will be required to say in the role play. Obviously, you're lucky if you've got more information written out. You can use that to prepare as accurately as possible and try and literally think through exactly what you're going to say and exactly when in the role play. That is the whole use of that preparation time, and that's what you should be thinking through in your prep time. There's no need to show off, but one thing you do need to pay attention to, you do need to provide the information that each question is asking for as well. That's very important in the role play. And another thing to pay attention to is if the situation is formal or informal, because that dictates how you would address the examiner, particularly if you're asked to address the examiner directly, or if you have to ask a question to the examiner in this fictitious role play situation. So if it's informal, then you would use the du form, the informal way to say you in German, which is du, and that would take the second person singular verb form. If it's a more formal situation, though, say you're supposed to be speaking to a teacher in the role play scenario, or somebody else who's meant to be older than you, or a stranger, or in a position of authority. If that's the case, then you must use the more formal Sie form. If you're referring to the examiner, if you're speaking to the examiner, and that Sie form would take the third person plural verb form. So those differences are definitely things to keep track of. Okay, now I'm going to give you an example. So this first example comes from sample material, the new sample material actually for AQA. As mentioned, AQA and Pearson edXL GCSE have somewhat changed their syllabus and the format of their papers from 2026 onwards. This is a foundation tier role play, actually. In red are the parts that the examiner would say. And in brown, effectively, those are the parts that the candidate would have to say. That is the instructions that the candidate would be given on their particular role play card. So, of course, on the role play card, the candidate would only have their own instructions written out. all of these parts, all of these questions that the examiner would say would not be given on the role play card for the candidate. Otherwise, they would be able to. Otherwise, they would know exactly what the questions will ask them. So I'll give you a bit of time to read through this. And on the next screen, I'm going to show my ideal answers. So how I would answer every single one of these questions if I were the candidate doing this role play. So what kind of information I would give, how much detail, how to phrase it, and so on. I would also make a note of the scenario, which is written out at the top. The examiner should always read out the scenario just before the role play officially starts. The scenario is: Du sprichst mit deinem deutschen Freund oder deiner deutschen Freundin. Ich bin dein Freund oder deine Freundin. So you're speaking to your German friend. I'm your friend. So a very common scenario for these role plays, actually. Okay, let me show you my ideal answers then. So you can see this is the same as before. In red is everything that the examiner would say or would ask. And in brown, we've got what I would say if I were the candidate. And of course, translations are provided in full in brackets in English as well. So you can use those to help if needed. I'll just point out, I'll give you some time to read over this, but I'll point out a few of the features of my answers. You can see I've kept things very simple. I haven't provided any more information than what is required by the question itself. If it asks what sort of person are you, I've just given a very simple answer. Ich bin sehr sportlich. I'm very sporty. And unless the question is asking for two pieces of information or two details, which can happen in the role play, I've only provided one. So I would only give the number of pieces of information that you're required to give. I would not go beyond that. If you do go beyond that, say you give 3 pieces of information when the question you're asked only asks for 2, then you do risk being penalized if you make a mistake in your German when you're giving that third bit of information, for example. So it's risky, and there's no need to do so in terms of exam technique. There's no point in giving them a chance to take marks off you. The grammar, I've kept it very simple. All of the verbs here are actually in the present tense. So you can see that I really haven't shown off my language at all. And I've prioritized accuracy in German, so making sure that there's no real mistakes, and giving the information that every single question is asking for or requiring. And as long as you do that, particularly this is also a foundation tier example, so simpler than higher tier. As long as you do that, you can score very, very well in the role play. Okay, now we'll move on to the second example. So this example is for Cambridge iGCSE. Cambridge iGCSE, as an iGCSE exam board, has no distinction between a foundation and higher tier. They're the same thing. You can see the scenario is written out at the top again in red. I've done the same thing as before. So everything the examiner would say, all of the examiner's questions are written in red. And in between, in brown, we've got what would be written on the candidate's role play card. So those are the instructions the candidate would have written, and the candidate would have to prepare as well during that 10 to 15 minutes of preparation time. And I've translated everything into English as well in brackets. So this one is this is an older Cambridge iGCSE role play, by the way. So if you're it has changed for Cambridge iGCSE. The role plays are now quite different, and students are no longer given these kind of detailed prompts. They are given very little information currently to prepare for, actually, to use in their preparation time. But this is somewhat harder in nature, and more challenging for the candidate. So I'll give you a bit of time to read through these instructions, the scenario, what the examiner would ask. You can see that some questions here do require 2 bits of information. So, for example, here the candidate would have to greet the employee and also say what they would like to do. Here they're asked to mention two factors or 2 things, for example, as well. So do note how many pieces of information you need to give for each prompt. Okay, and here, as before, are my model answers. So if I were the candidate doing this role play, these are the answers in brown now that I would give. And in red, as before, we've got the scenario at the top. Sie sind auf einem Bahnhof in Deutschland. Sie wollen nach Hamburg zu einem Konzert fahren. Meaning you're at a train station in Germany and you want to go to Hamburg for a concert. And in red again here, we've got all of the questions that the examiner would ask the student. So I'll give you a bit of time to read through this, and especially the model answers. And I'll point out a few features. So I have been quite careful to give all of the information required. As mentioned here, some of the prompts required 2 pieces of information. For example, over here, you have to express disappointment. And I've said, wie schade, what a shame, in order to express disappointment. And then you have to, as part of the same answer, you have to say what time the concert is supposed to begin. So I've taken care to provide all of the information required without skipping anything at all. And apart from that, I've actually kept the language itself, particularly the grammar, quite simple. So I haven't really shown off. This is certainly a more challenging role play than the first example that we saw. So I have had to use some different tenses. Ich war, for example, I was, because this question is asking about the past. Why did you reach the train station so late? So that's the imperfect tense. I haven't really shown off my language much at all. I haven't tried to use complex phrases or structures because the role play is not the right part to do that, really, of the speaking exam. And I've really focused on making sure that my German otherwise is accurate and that there are no mistakes there. Okay, now there's time for a brief quiz just to check your understanding of the German GCSE and iGCSE role plays. So, question number 1. Where is the role play set? Try and recall this. There obviously can be variations in exactly where the role play is set, but there is a general rule. That's what we're looking for here. Okay, let me show you the answer then. This is in a German-speaking environment, of course. Yeah, the role play will always be set in a German-speaking environment. That's not necessarily in Germany. It could be in a different German-speaking country or place as well. Question 2, this one's true or false. The examiner will always play the role of the candidate's friend. Have a think, try and decide whether that one is true or false. Okay, and I'm going to show the answer. This one is false. The examiner's role can really vary. And as you do practice, ideally using past papers and past examples of role plays, you will see quite a few different scenarios come up. And the examiner's role can very much vary as well. The student's role is much simpler. As a student, you would really generally just play yourself. Question 3, which is true or false. Again, you should give very detailed answers in the role play. Something that I talked about a few times. So no excuses for getting this one wrong. Okay, but on a more serious note, I'll show the answer now. So this one is also false, actually. For the role play specifically, you just stick to the information that you're required to give. You don't need to elaborate beyond that. You don't need to include more complex grammatical structures here at all. And you can still score very much towards the top band of marks in the role play. And finally, number 4, who is it that normally starts and ends the role play? Again, I'll give you some seconds to think through this. Okay, and I'm going to reveal the answer then. So this is the examiner. So there can be exceptions to that rule for some other exam boards, but yeah, it is generally the examiner that starts and ends the role play the vast majority of the time. And in between, of course, the examiner and candidate will take it in turns to speak, just like a natural real life conversation. Okay, if you have questions about any of this, or if you'd like to know about more personalized help, which I do provide as well, you can get in touch by email, through Facebook, or Instagram. I post on these social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, and even LinkedIn every single day, sharing my passion for languages with people, naturally, hopefully motivating people to learn more and more languages. And yeah, trying to show just how it can be so fun and yeah, such a worthwhile and beneficial thing to do. But I do post a lot about GCSE and iGCSE language exams too, including how to prepare as much as possible, how to revise, and how to go into the exam feeling fully confident. So do follow me on each of those platforms. I have many resources, including free resources available for GCSE and iGCSE languages, including German. And I do one-to-one classes, group classes, courses, and more. So don't hesitate to reach out if you'd like to know more of any of this.